So Tom, I appreciate you bringing out one of your bikes so that you can walk me through setup and bulletproofing of an adventure bike. And I'm sure that a lot went into arriving at this particular configuration. So I'm curious what your background is and so forth, and the experience that brought you to this setup.
Sure. So I've been riding motorcycles for over 40 years. The last 20 years, 25 years, I've been riding primarily dirt and off-road. I've got an extensive background in off-road woods racing, and I've done very well nationally in a variety of different series. I started Motowayz, this off-road motorcycle training company, about 8 years ago. Initially, before I started that, I became a MSF dirt bike school coach, and then about 5 years ago they launched the adventure bike course, and I was the first instructor to teach that commercially in the United States. I'm certified by United States Motorcycle Coaching Association as a dirt coach, and so I also am very active and heavily involved with backcountry discovery routes. And I take that expertise and that background and I apply it toward training and helping people understand and to be more effective, efficient, and safe riders off-road. So that's kind of my background to get me to where I am today. I'm also a wilderness first responder, so I'm better prepared to handle backcountry issues in case something goes wrong. Fortunately, I don't have to use it that often, so that's a good thing. But we're here to kind of talk about adventure bike setup and bulletproofing.
Right.
And so I've got this is a work in progress. This is a relatively new motorcycle for me, so it's not completely set up. So we'll kind of go over a few things that I've done and a few things that are still coming on it to get it to where I want. This is primarily my street bike. But I do use it for training, particularly when I'm working with BMW crowds. Right. And so, right now I've got a set of street tires on it, but you might see over here, I've got an extra set of Woody's wheels that I picked up with big block tires on it. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but I'll swap the tires in and out. But I want to set this up a little bit more for adventure riding. And do the bulletproofing on it that I feel comfortable with. So let's start at the top. Okay. Starting at the top, the mirrors. The mirrors, stock mirrors that come on bikes are typically, they kind of bolt in to what's called the perch, and the perch is holding up the mirror. And it's also, holding up, in this case, the front brake, and on this side here, the clutch. Yeah. And so if a bike falls over and you've got a fixed mirror, which is kind of a lever, if you will, you could possibly break this perch. Yeah. And if that perch breaks, well, now you've lost your front brake, or you've lost your clutch over here. Right. So one of the things I like to do is I've got these double take mirrors, which if they take an impact, they move. They're basically on a ram mount. I can also take and loosen it, and when I'm going through rough, narrow, if I'm doing some bushwhacking, if you will, I can fold them down and get them out of the way. Also, if I'm trailering my bike with other bikes nearby, I can fold it out of the way. But that's a nice piece of insurance to help prevent, something transmitting to the perch and cracking it. Another thing that you can do with these perches is you can take the perch apart, because it's typically two bolts that hold that on there. You can take the perch off, wrap it with some Teflon tape, and then just snug it up again. And that way the perch will slide too if it takes an impact. Yeah. So that's, that's something that I do on all of my dual sport bikes and all of my adventure bikes, because they do take a hit from time to time. Right. One of the two most important pieces of armoring for the motorcycle is these hand protection. Now these happen to be Bark Busters, which is a brand,
Right.
and I don't have the flags on them, but it's very heavy steel, which will take the impact of a heavy motorcycle like this, on an impact. The stock ones that come from the factory are plastic. As soon as you drop the bike on one of them, they typically shatter.
Right.
So this is a first thing that I like to recommend for folks to take a look at. Things you have to be careful of with these full wrap handlebars is, let's just say if you went over the handlebars, you could get your hand stuck in there, and that could cause a fracture. I've seen there's some new flag ones out that I just saw from a company called Molecule, and they're really heavy gauge plastic. I just saw them. I don't have any experience with them, but it's open here, so you have more room to get your hand out of there if there's an issue. I'm not sure if it was
what the support would be like.
But yes, but there's new things coming on the market. But you want to have something that's going to absorb an impact, and it's really about protecting your hands, but also about protecting your levers. Because if it falls, you don't have good protection on here, you can break a lever. There are some other levers on the market, like ASV levers, that are flexible to complement it as well. But that's what this is really about, is protecting your hands, but also, even more importantly, protecting the levers. Because they're easy to snag. And I have broken levers with this type of guard on there still. But and I always carry another set of both hand levers and foot levers under my seat, or I'll take and tie wrap them to a frame member, something like that. So I do carry things like these under somewhere I stash them on the bike. Right, exactly. Let's talk about the windscreen. So this windscreen here is you can raise it up. It's also retractable. When you're riding off-road, you want to keep this as low as possible, because if you do have a tip over, you want to reduce the exposure of this, because if it were to hit a limb or a rock or something like that, these are going to potentially snap.
Right.
And they're not cheap. The other thing, and even more importantly, you want to keep them low, because if you're riding in tight terrain, if you're in really tight terrain, these tall ones will come up and hit you in the neck or on the chin bar of your helmet. So you really want to try to keep these as low profile as you can for safety, but then also just to minimize the exposure and for the expense of replacing them. On the front of this headlight, I've got a metal screen, and that helps prevent rocks from being thrown up from another bike in front of me and breaking my headlight. And on these motorcycles, there's nothing. It seems like everything is $500 or more.
At least.
And so this is a nominal investment to help protect the headlight, because I have broken a couple of headlights over the years where I didn't have a screen on them. So that's helpful to have. When I look at the handlebars here, you typically want to have the bend of the handlebar right in line with on the same plane as the fork.
Okay.
And when the handlebar bend is on the same plane as the fork, you have more steering accuracy that way.
Oh.
So that's something to think about. A lot of people, when they buy a new motorcycle, they automatically go and put bar risers on them. Most people that put bar risers on that I see, and my riders that come to my camps, they really don't need them. And it puts them, in a position where they're standing up too much. You want to be leaning forward a little bit on the bike naturally, even though it's your legs that's holding you up. It's not your arms that are holding you up. You want to be leaning forward slightly. And I find many times that people got bar risers on the bikes that are just not appropriate for their ergonomics.
Okay.
With the brake levers, my brake levers are kind of slightly down a little bit. They're The brake and the clutch lever are slightly down, so they're comfortable for me to operate whether I'm in a seated or a standing position and going back before too. So that's something to kind of think about, and you want to adjust in both when you're in a seated and a standing position and make sure it works well in both situations.
I'm just curious, back to the front, you're talking about the cost of fixing things. I have seen bikes when they were going aggressive off-road, they would take the turn signals and zip tie them into the side so they wouldn't get snapped off. Is there something you plan to do with that, or you're good with they're okay? They look flexible. I mean,
they're flexible, but there's some bikes behind me, and you're going to see a bunch of these blinkers that are knocked off.
Okay.
There are some aftermarket blinkers on the market that that you can remove. They're almost like on a phono plug.
Oh yeah.
And there's a variety of aftermarket things that you can do, but yeah. So
I always think about those.
But you can certainly do that. Because I use this particular bike more for street, I'm going to leave them on there. But not a bad idea to take them off and zip tie them so they don't break if you're riding the bike more primarily off-road.
Right.
So hadn't thought about that. That's actually a good idea.
And I see you got your headlight
Yep.
covering. But, okay.
So as I work my way down, I'm not necessarily a really big fan of tank bags.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a tank bag, you really don't want to do anything larger than this. If you're doing a lot of technical riding, because if you're doing a lot of technical riding and you're bending over, these will come up and hit you in the chest. The bigger ones can get in your way of your range of motion of steering. But this EnduroStand bag is out of Switzerland. They make really nice bags that are waterproof without having to put a cover on them. And the panniers, they've got a breakaway feature that if you hit a tree or something like that, they'll actually break away rather than damage the bag. And I'll show you that a little bit later. But don't go too big on, or just stay away from tank bags if you're able to give you that freedom and range of motion that you need, to have on the bike. As I work my way down, we've got a guard here around the cylinder head, which is, of course, really, really important to protect the cylinder head. And then also, there's a stock skid plate on the bike. So that's the other, in my opinion, the second or first, most important piece of armoring on the bike is the skid plate.
Right.
I don't have a center stand on this bike because I took it off to put another skid plate on, and I didn't like it when I mounted it up.
Okay.
And so I've got another skid plate I'm going to order that I like that provides protection underneath the engine on the sides. And when you look for replacement skid plates, you want to find something that allows you to change the oil and change filters and things like that, preferably without having to remove the skid plate, because that can be kind of a pain. But there's also armoring that comes up higher on the bikes, which is kind of cool looking, and it can be helpful if you're really riding in rough terrain and the bike falls over on the side of a hill. Sometimes you need to turn the bike around a little bit by getting out on either the far front or the far rear wheel to get leverage, and then rotate it. And so that protection will help prevent you from scratching up your plastic, and in my case, my beautiful graphics. And but yet, when you think about extra armoring like that, I've got another motorcycle that in order for me to change the air filter, I have to remove a lot of this plastic.
Right.
I have to remove the gas tank,
take the gas tank
just to go down to the air filter and change out a routine maintenance item.
Right.
Now, if I've got additional armoring here, that might have to come off as well. So those are some things to think about before you go buying armoring. How's that going to impact my maintenance of the bike and access to the bike and those sort of things that a lot of times you don't think about till it's already bolted on.
And I know some people put bags on them too when they have the upper armor stuff.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I've got some bags that I'll put on.
Which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but I've seen people do it.
No, it's handy. It can be handy for sure. I try to travel with as least big of bags as possible, and you can put some bags on some of those bars, and it's a good way to kind of keep the weight down a little bit lower. You got to be mindful of what you're carrying in the bags, because the bike has a tip over and the bag is between the bike and the ground, you can smash some stuff.
Right.
And I've done that before with an air pump that I was carrying. So it's something that you have to be kind of thoughtful about what you're carrying in the bags and so forth. Looking at the pegs. And so these are aftermarket pegs, and what I like about these pegs is they're rounded on the end, because some aftermarket pegs are, it's nice to have sometimes a bigger platform.
Right.
It's more comfortable to stand on all day long if you're standing a lot.
Yeah.
But some of the pegs are more rectangular shaped, which means rather than this being rounded out here, it's rectangular. And a lot of times if you're doing really tight turns, some people like to point their toes into the turn. And if my toes are pointed out this way, and I've got a 90-degree edge right here, I don't have a whole lot of surface area on the peg there. And so having aftermarket pegs that are rounded, you'll find that are more desirable, they're more comfortable, and you'll have more surface area that your boot is on in order to help control the bike, because we're steering the bike a lot really with our feet.
With the feet,
Exactly. Now, in the case of the brake lever here, I really recommend, can you grab that piece of wood right there?
Yeah.
This brake lever is not stock for this bike. The stock brake lever is lower and you're not really able to raise it up. And when you're riding off-road and you want to do rear brake steering to get, make a turn in really tight quarters and things like that, you need to have immediate access with your foot to that brake pedal. Right. So I took the stock one off, and this comes off an Adventure model. This is GS, but it's not the Adventure model. The Adventure model has this additional component here, which then raises it up. Right. And so now I really recommend having the brake pedal at least flush,
right,
if not even up more so. If you're riding, the bike properly, you're on the balls of your feet, and you slide your foot forward in order to step on the brake. So if you're riding the bike properly, you're not going to be riding the brake.
Right.
So it's okay to have this at least level, if not even up a little bit more. That way you get immediate action and response from the bike when you step on it. I've seen some riders with this adjusted so low, they're sticking their toe down, and then that takes longer for you to engage the brake, but now you're exposing your toe to obstacles like rocks and roots and things like that you could snag your foot on, and that could lead to a foot injury. So there's aftermarket components that you can bolt on to this, braking this brake pad area, for lack of better terms, in order to elevate it a little bit. So that's something that I suggest for people to look at, especially if you want to, control the bike.
Right. And we all want to do that.
Yeah, especially, if you're riding in technical stuff.
Right.
Of course, we got a passenger peg But but on my other bikes that I ride off road, my wife is not riding two up with me off road.
Right.
So I'll take the passenger peg off because it's just something else for me to catch the
on,
cuff
yeah.
of my pants on, and that can happen fairly frequently. I've got this bike set up for both hard bags and soft bags on my other bikes that I ride more primarily off road. I don't have this rack on there, and I go primarily with soft bags. So we'll get into kind of hard bags versus soft bags.
I was going to say there's a debate about that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that after we go
When we
through
get
the bike.
done, okay.
Yep, fair enough. So. On thinking about the lever, over on this side, we've got the shifter lever, and that's fairly on the same plane.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where you want to have it. You could even have it up a little bit higher, but if you find yourself bumping it, and downshifting, then you might want to adjust it. But typically, you want to have that up at least flat at the same plane, because if you're wearing hard motocross style boots, dirt bike boots, you need to have some room to get your toe underneath there.
Right.
And so having that up a little higher gives you, ease of access and for you to kind
I've
of
been on mine where
shift it easy.
I could hook it with the sole of my boot I could get under there. Yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah, I need that up.
Yeah, yep. And then coming back to, I'm not going to get into great detail on the suspension setup,
Right.
because
That's a whole new
that's
other
a
thing.
whole nother animal. But thinking about suspension, what are some of the factors that can affect how you set up a suspension?
Yeah.
It can be your weight, it can be the weight of the motorcycle. It can be the weight of the motorcycle with a passenger, with gear on it.
Yeah.
It can be how fast you're going, what the terrain is like that you're riding on, with all of those variables. So there's a lot of variables that come into play with suspension and setting up a suspension. And it's really important, to have a suspension set up, because it'll help you ride more efficiently and safely. The goal, with a suspension is to always keep the wheels on the ground.
Right.
You want to get as much full range of travel out of your suspension as you can without it topping out or bottoming out in order to be able to keep the tires always on the ground. And that then allows you to accelerate and brake and to steer, much more quickly than if, the tires are bouncing on and off, and separating themselves from the ground.
I think like if you were in a real pothole or tree roots and things like that, the rebound of it all too could be variable depending on what you're riding on, what kind of a terrain you're riding on.
Yeah, so typically, some of these bikes have got, electronic, it's all controlled electronically. I personally, when I'm riding off-road, I like to be able to adjust the compression, the rebound on both the front and the rear myself for how I like to ride it. But, in the case of this, mini bikes, some of that is all done electronically. But anyhow, that's a whole nother discussion.
That's a whole big
topic.
topic.
I will tell you that, especially when it comes to people that ride professionally or race professionally, they'll take a better suspension over a lesser engine.
Really?
Yeah. Because suspension is that important. They'll take a better tuned suspension over a hotter engine because they'll get more out of the motorcycle that way.
Okay.
A little bit about tires. So, if you're going to be riding off-road, you really want to have at least 50-50 tires on the bike, which 50-50 means they're set up for 50% on-road, 50% for off-road. And, that way it gives you some traction and purchase to, gravel roads and dirt and things like that. But yet they're still, safe to ride on pavement or when it's wet, but you got to be careful.
Yeah.
I mean, these aren't 100% street tires. But, because I ride primarily off-road, when I have, a second set of wheels or I've got another bike that's, I just really only ride it
Is
off-road.
that what these are, like a 50/50?
Those are 50/50s. That's what came on those wheels when I got them. So that's, that's something that, you can ride, on the road in the rain. You got to be careful, though. And you certainly in that case want to be riding with traction control and ABS on to help prevent slippage. Now, when you're riding off-road, of course, you want to turn ABS and traction control off in order to get the most as you can out of the bike. But that tire there, if you want to roll it over, is that's a Motowayz or a Motowayz Adventure Tractionator, and that's like a 80% off-road, 20% on-road tire. That's my go-to tire for the front and rear. It's got some of the deepest tread out of any of the tires I've found on the market, and the most aggressive tread. So for something with that aggressive a tread, I've got the longest life out of those tires over time. They're a little more expensive typically, but the return is I've found I get a lot more life out of them, and whatever I can do to minimize having to take tires on and off and get them changed, I'm all about that too. But
I'm curious, I'm from Florida. Paddle tires seem to be what people run in sand, even on like the dune buggies and like that.
Sure.
So would this be a better sand than that, do you think, because the treads are lined up more like paddle blades, or not?
Possibly. I haven't had this tire in the sand, and then what depends on the size of the bike too.
Yeah.
So I think that would be something good to experiment with. I can't speak to how both of these tires would do side by side in the sand, but theoretically, you're right. But tires that are more paddle oriented, they're going to wear the paddles off, much more quickly.
Right.
But you take this tire here, it's more paddle-like, but it's got a very low profile tread, where this one here is got a much deeper one. But again, I can't compare the two because I've not ridden the two side by side. But it's a good thought. It's something to think about with the terrain that you're riding in and what kind of tire that
we
you
get a
should
lot
be
of sand down
getting.
there.
But like suspension tires or something that we could spend a day on and talk about those as well.
Deal,
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
On the kickstand over here, I've got an aftermarket larger foot that goes on there.
Yes.
So if I'm in the sand or if I'm in soft terrain, when I set the bike on the side stand, it won't, just go under the ground. Now, what's kind of important to think about, this is a Givi foot, if you will. I'll just call it a foot. Some of the cheaper ones that are out there, they'll rattle.
Oh, really?
And some, but you get one that's decent quality. They got a little tang in there that keeps it kind of spring resistance against it from rattling.
Okay.
So think about when you're looking at something like this, you don't want that rattling all day long while you're riding down the road. That'll drive you crazy. So just kind of make sure they're designed with a little tensioner in there so they don't rattle.
I was curious, you don't have a center stand on this, so I guess you wouldn't have a problem, but if you did, do you have to take clearance when it's up into consideration for which one you'd get?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you that there's more clearance with this than having a center stand. Now, center stands are super convenient because, it's really a lot easier to change the tires and to get them on and off the bike when you have a center stand.
Right.
However, center stands hang lower.
Right.
And so you do have less clearance with a center stand than you do with a side stand like this. But when I take
I'm thinking like
flip
when you
this
put
up,
that up, would it impact the center stand or?
No, the center stand, this still works with the center stand.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I had my center stand on here, It works fine. And I had my center stand on here, but I took it off in order to put the other skid plate on.
Right.
And it's a little bit of a bear to replace with the tensioning springs.
Yeah.
So I've just left it off until I get the next skid plate on there.
Okay.
And then I'll mount them again, especially since I'm using this more for street. You know, if I'm really doing a lot of technical riding, I might consider leaving the center stand off.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, if, you know, that's something you need to think about when you were buying an aftermarket foot or something for that, hey, this could be a problem, or maybe it never is.
Yeah, no, it's not a problem with the center stand, and it's not been a problem yet with my other bikes and the different skid plates that I use on the bikes.
One other thing that I've heard over the years, you know, is the kickstand there, the side stand has a switch, right? You can't, if the center stand's down, you try to put it in gear, it kills the engine.
Right.
And that can be impacted and damaged, and
Sure.
do you put a guard on that, or do you disable it, or?
Well,
I know I shouldn't say disable.
well people do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I have, and so that's a personal option, but people do defeat those. There's a way to defeat them.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's just something that you have to kind of make a personal decision on, because they are a bit of a hassle. I have a KLR that I had ridden from Atlanta down through Mexico, Guatemala, back up through Belize, and took a ferry ride from Progreso around Tampa, back to Tampa and back up. And the only trouble I had on that bike was going through southern Texas, and the bike just quit like I shut my ignition off.
Right.
And
That switch?
it was that switch.
Yeah.
And I literally cut the two leads going to that switch and tied them together. And never had an issue with the bike the rest of that trip. So
I didn't know if you put guards on. I know they have guards for them.
yeah, so, you know, and there's guards for all sorts of things. There's guards for protecting, you know, the rear brake master cylinder, and there's all sorts of guards and farkles that you can put on. It's like, where do you draw the line? And so, you know, everything with motorcycles is a compromise.
Right.
And so you can put aftermarket lights on, and it's good to be seen. But for me, those are things that I'll knock off, you know, when I'm bushwhacking and things like that. So I try to keep the bike as clean as possible, to keep it as light as possible, and not add things that, you know, I could break off. But, you know, there is appropriate, you know, things for protection, and there are some really good ideas. But, you know, you can go on and on on with adding, you know, various farkles and things like that. So you just have to kind of make a decision on how you ride and what do you think is going to be important to you based upon how you ride.
Yeah, you can put another motorcycle worth of money on them, you know.
Sure.
You could have bought another bike for, if you go nuts with it.
Yeah, and you can go nuts. The best way for me to buy a new motorcycle is to buy a used one with low miles, and I've already added all that stuff.
There you go. All right.
You want to talk about bags, hard bags versus soft bags?
Yeah, because that's a debate. I know that, you know, some people are, the hard bags are more protection, and some people are like, if you dab your foot down, they could, you know, you could injure your leg.
Yeah, so there's a place for both of them. You know, especially I like running with hard bags when I'm riding on pavement. You know, what people like about hard bags is some people think they can carry more stuff in them. They're lockable.
Right.
They're also, you know, they're provide more protection to your what's inside of here. Yeah. But if the bike goes down, you know, it can provide protection to the bike because it keeps the bike off of the ground.
And your leg.
However, you know, if your foot happens to be underneath that, now it's very unforgiving. And so, you know, that's a downside of the hard bags, is from a safety perspective, especially if you're riding off-road. You know, if you get your foot, let's just say this is on here,
When
you know,
move your tire?
that's fine. Just, but this will be mounted a little lower. But if you get your foot caught between the ground and the bottom of this bag, that could lead to an injury.
Right.
If this bike were to fall over and my foot is between this hard bag and the ground, that could lead to an injury. So some people have taken these hard bags, you know, and they've had some old janky hard bags that, you know, they're running on an old KLR. I have a friend of mine that had one on an old a KLR, and you know, he would heat water in it over a fire and, you know, use it to take a little bath with.
Oh, yeah?
So there's all sorts of things. Of course, you could put ice in your favorite beverage in these and make a run to the store. So there's a lot of things, you know, benefits of the hard bags. However, you know, if I'm riding off-road, I really, you know, don't recommend hard bags, and I recommend something, you know, like these are, you know,
Saddlebags,
the
yeah.
Enduro bag and Enduro stand saddlebags. These are like a mid-size bag, and so if I'm not necessarily going overnight, I don't need the larger bags. I can still carry my medical kit. I can still carry tools and things like that in this. But no, the Enduro and other manufacturers make a variety of different size bags. And again, this one here has got this feature here that breaks away if you were to snag the bag on a tree or something like that, so you don't tear the bag. But if you get your heel up underneath this bag, or if the bike were to fall on that bag on your foot, it's a lot more forgiving. So these are a lot safer to use when you're riding off-road.
Okay, yeah.
And that's primarily the big difference between the two. I don't use hard bags at all when I'm riding off-road. But you know, I use hard bags when I'm riding on road because the convenience of them, and less likely to fall on road, where I'm more likely to fall and have issues off-road because of the terrain differences and just the nature of riding off-road.
And I know the hard ones, people tend to start stacking stuff up on them, and
Yeah, so
you can go nuts and
You
make
know-
the bike too top heavy and everything else.
yeah,
so-
I mean, there's some people go crazy with these top bags here, and you know they're harder to get throw your leg over the top of them. I like this because it's a little bit lower.
Yeah.
And if my wife is riding two up, she can still put her butt up against that and have a little bit of support. There's some bags that fit along here. That are pretty convenient, especially if you're moving to something without a tank bag, but you want a bag here. There's some bags that kind of stretch across there.
Yeah.
And then Endurostan has got a topper that actually goes here and it extends this up about this high. So you can just
Keep piling it on.
pile it on, right?
Right.
But as you ride more, you learn how to pack.
Right.
You kind of learn how to pack a lot lighter as a little time goes by, and you get a little education on it.
Yeah, been through that. Street, but same thing, I'm sure. All right, well,
So those are
that's a lot.
those are the kind of the essentials.
Yeah.
That I like to cover with new riders when they're thinking about setting up their bike and bulletproofing the bike. Because if you're out in the middle of nowhere on an adventure ride, like go out on the Wyoming BDR or different places, it can be a long walk. So from a safety perspective, it's good to do everything you can to minimize risk of having an issue with the bike to keep yourself safe.
Okay, great. I do want to ask you one other thing, though, whether you want it in or not.
Sure, well, let's just see how it goes.
Most people I've ever talked to about BDRs is like you really need to know how to repair or change a tire when you're out there. And so do you carry tire irons or things like that when you go? Or
Sure. Well, BDR or not, if I'm on a day ride,
yeah,
and here in North Georgia, I'm going up into the Appalachians and Smokies, and I can be in desolate areas, and if I have an issue, I got to be able to change my tire.
Yeah.
I got to either be able to plug it, or I got to be, depending on the bike, I need to change the tubes.
Right.
So whether it's a BDR or I'm out for a day ride, I don't want to be stranded. So I am carrying, the essential tools, for the bike. One of the things I like to do is put together a tool kit and test all the tools in it, to all the nuts and bolts on that bike, and eliminate all the other tools that don't fit any nuts or bolts or anything on that bike. So I just eliminate that weight. And of course, I carry an inflator. Cycle Pump is they got a lifetime warranty on their pumps, and I use those. And then I carry patch kits, and I do carry levers, and levers are something that I carry in my toolkit. Or, that's something else too that you can tie wrap to frame members, and, you can squirrel away in different places on the bike, like my control levers that I hide in different places on the bike. But absolutely, it's a good idea to be carrying tools to do, basic maintenance things that might come up, and certainly fixing flats, whether it's with a plug or with a tube, is something, that you need to be thoughtful. Now, you're thinking about tubes, you can typically get away. I carry a front tire tube. Typically, front tires are a little more diameter than the rear tire. But if you're carrying a front tire, you can still use that tube in the rear to get you out of a jam, right? Yeah. So I typically just carry one tube, and I do carry a patch kit in case I have issues and putting the new tube in and I pinch it. I do still carry a patch kit as a backup for a tube issue.
Okay, yeah. I kind of always thought, I keep hearing that, you can just, if you're going to ride a big BDR, you can almost count on somebody's going to be needing some tire work.
Yeah, no, and when you're riding a big BDR and you have, let's just say, a small group of riders, one of the things that we'd like to do a week before that we take off on a long BDR is we all meet a week before, and everybody lays all their tools out on the ground, and we inspect the tools that everybody has. Yeah. And if everybody's got an air pump, well, we only need one, maybe two. Yeah. Maybe two. Let's say a group of 5 riders, and we don't need everybody doesn't need to be carrying tire levers. And so we kind of go through, see what everybody's got, sort stuff out to minimize what we're all carrying on the bikes, and we also know who's got what if we have an issue. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you can take a lot of weight off and everything.
Yeah, indeed. And it's, when you're riding like that with a small group, it's always a team effort, to some degree, whether it's, maintaining the bike or helping picking up bikes or getting people out of precarious situations. So the team effort starts, in our case, a week before we even start the ride. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Great. I think that pretty well covers it.
Yeah, good.
All right, well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me and allowing me to kind of, share a few thoughts on this.
Great, yeah. Thanks.
You bet.